The bright lights of the studio flickered as the cameras focused on the set, where Donald Trump was about to sit down for a live interview. The tension in the room was thick. Everyone knew this wasn't going to be just any ordinary interview. This one had the potential to reveal things no one expected. The reporters in the room whispered quietly among themselves, speculating about what Trump might say. The audience waited with bated breath, not knowing what was coming next. The host of the interview, a well-known liberal reporter named Sarah Williams, had been known for her sharp questions and no-nonsense attitude. She wasn't afraid to ask tough questions, even if they made people uncomfortable. Trump, on the other hand, was no stranger to the media. He had been through countless interviews before, but today felt different. He knew this one was going to be unlike any other. As the cameras began rolling, Sarah gave a slight nod to Trump, signaling the start of the interview. Trump adjusted his suit, straightened his tie, and gave his usual confident smile. But there was something different in his eyes today, something a little more guarded. Sarah wasted no time. "Mr. Trump," she said, her voice calm but firm, "thank you for joining us today. I have a lot of questions, but I want to start with something that has been on everyone's mind for a while now. Your marriage. It's been in the news more than once, but there are still a lot of unanswered questions." The moment Sarah spoke, the air in the room seemed to grow heavier. Trump's smile faded slightly, but he kept his composure. The camera zoomed in on his face, capturing every subtle change in his expression. The audience, both in the studio and at home, could feel the shift in energy. They knew something big was coming. Trump cleared his throat and leaned forward slightly, trying to maintain control. "I've spoken about my marriage many times before. There's nothing new to say." Sarah didn't back down. She had prepared for this moment. She had expected him to try to brush her off, but she wasn't going to let that happen. "But there are things that have come up recently, things that have raised some eyebrows. It's hard to ignore them when they're right in front of us." Trump's eyes narrowed, and his fingers tightened around the armrests of his chair. He could feel the tension building. He knew what Sarah was doing. She was pushing him to talk about something that had always been kept private. But Trump wasn't someone who liked to reveal personal details, especially when it came to his marriage. He had always tried to keep his private life separate from the public eye. But now it was clear that wasn't going to happen. Sarah continued, her voice steady. "We've all seen the headlines, the rumors, the whispers. But what we haven't seen are the answers. So I want to ask you, Mr. Trump, what is the truth about your marriage?" The room seemed to hold its breath. Trump's heart rate increased, but he forced himself to stay calm. He wasn't going to let this reporter get under his skin. He had dealt with much worse in the past, and he wasn't about to let her get the best of him now. "I don't know what you're talking about," he replied, his voice cool but with a hint of tension. "My marriage is private, and it's none of your business." But Sarah wasn't done. She had done her research, and she wasn't going to let Trump get away with evading her questions. "But you're a public figure, Mr. Trump. Your marriage has been in the spotlight for years, and recently there have been reports that suggest things are not as perfect as they seem. People want answers." Trump shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He could feel the heat building in the room, the weight of the question pressing down on him. He could tell that this wasn't going to be an easy conversation. The audience was watching, waiting for his response, and he could feel that they were starting to lean in, intrigued by what might happen next. For a moment, Trump was silent. The studio grew quiet, and the tension became unbearable. Would he snap? Would he brush her off again? Or would he finally reveal something the public had been waiting to hear? As the seconds ticked by, everyone in the room knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning of what promised to be an explosive interview. As the silence lingered in the room, the tension seemed to grow even heavier. Trump sat back in his chair, his jaw clenched tightly. The audience in the studio was on edge, waiting for what would happen next. The lights above gleamed down on him, and the camera zoomed in, capturing every detail of his tense expression. It was clear that this was a moment that could change everything. Sarah didn't let the silence drag on for too long. She was a seasoned reporter, and she knew how to handle moments like this. Instead of letting Trump regain control of the situation, she pressed forward with more precision. "You're right, Mr. Trump," Sarah said, her tone calm but filled with purpose. "You've kept your personal life out of the spotlight for a long time. But recently, that's become harder to do. There are new reports that suggest your marriage is on the rocks. People are wondering what's really going on behind closed doors." Trump's eyes flashed for a split second, and his body language shifted. It was a subtle change, but anyone who was paying attention could see it. The cool, confident exterior he had so carefully maintained started to crack just a little. His fists clenched at his sides, and his lips tightened into a thin line. Sarah didn't miss the change. She had expected this reaction, but she wasn't afraid. She had a job to do, and she wasn't going to let him dodge the tough questions. "Mr. Trump," Sarah continued, her voice unwavering, "your marriage has been the subject of speculation for years. But now people are questioning things they didn't before. Why do you think that is?" Trump looked directly at Sarah, his gaze intense. For a moment, he seemed to struggle internally, like he was weighing whether to answer her question or shut it down completely. But the clock was ticking, and the pressure was mounting. The whole world was watching, and there was no turning back now. "You know as well as I do that the media loves to create drama," Trump replied, his voice low and controlled. "They'll say anything to make a story out of nothing. There's no truth to any of these rumors." But Sarah wasn't satisfied. She knew this was just the beginning. She had seen the reports, heard the rumors, and she was determined to get to the bottom of it. She leaned in slightly, keeping her eyes locked on Trump's. "People aren't just talking about rumors anymore," Sarah said, her voice growing more assertive. "There are actual details being shared, things that suggest there's more going on than you're willing to admit. Your marriage may not be as perfect as you say." Trump's face turned red, and his grip on the armrests of his chair tightened. The tension in the room was so thick, it felt as though it could be sliced with a knife. The audience was completely silent now, every person hanging on to Sarah's every word. "You're out of line," Trump snapped, his voice sharp and laced with anger. "I won't sit here and let you spread lies about my family. I've had enough of this nonsense." Sarah, undeterred, sat back in her chair and gave a small nod. She knew she had struck a nerve. This was exactly what she had been waiting for. She wasn't going to back down. "Mr. Trump," Sarah said softly, but with a hint of challenge in her voice, "I'm not here to spread lies. I'm here to get to the truth that you've been trying to hide. The public deserves to know what's really happening behind closed doors, and with all due respect, you can't keep avoiding these questions forever." Trump was visibly angry now. He shifted in his seat, visibly frustrated by the direction of the interview. His face turned a darker shade of red as his breathing became more rapid. The audience could feel the heat rising in the room, and it was clear that Trump was losing control. Sarah continued to press, her eyes never leaving Trump's. "Mr. Trump, we've seen the pictures, we've heard the reports. Now it's time to hear your side of the story. Are you willing to answer the questions that everyone is asking?" For a moment, Trump didn't respond. He looked away, clearly trying to gather his thoughts. But the damage had already been done. The tension in the room was palpable. The audience could feel that this was no longer just a typical interview. It had become something much bigger. The walls were closing in on Trump, and there was no telling how far Sarah was willing to push him. With the spotlight on him and the pressure mounting, Trump's calm exterior was finally cracking. Would he snap, or would he find a way to regain control of the interview? The audience waited, holding their breath, knowing that whatever happened next would be a turning point in this explosive live TV moment. The pressure in the room was now unbearable. Trump's face was flushed with anger, his lips pressed tightly together as he tried to maintain his composure. The bright studio lights seemed to amplify the growing tension, casting harsh shadows across his face. Every move he made was carefully watched by both the studio audience and the millions watching from home. The room was silent, except for the soft hum of the cameras. The moment felt suspended in time. Sarah, however, showed no signs of backing down. Her gaze never wavered as she watched Trump closely, sensing the shift in his mood. She knew she had hit a nerve, and she was determined to keep the pressure on. This was the moment she had been waiting for, an opportunity to dig deeper and reveal the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it might make him. "Mr. Trump," Sarah began again, her voice calm but filled with purpose, "I can see you're frustrated. But I need you to understand that people want answers. They want the truth, especially when it comes to something as personal as your marriage." Trump's jaw clenched, and for a moment, it seemed as though he might explode. He opened his mouth, but his words were slow and deliberate. "I don't know what you're trying to do here, but I've been through enough. This is a personal matter, and I don't owe anyone an explanation about my marriage. My family is none of your business." Sarah nodded, acknowledging his point, but she wasn't about to let him off the hook so easily. "I understand that, Mr. Trump," she said softly. "But when your marriage becomes a topic of public discussion, when rumors and speculation swirl around, the public has a right to know what's really going on, especially when those rumors seem to suggest that things aren't as perfect as you claim." Trump's eyes darkened, and the veins in his neck stood out as he leaned forward in his chair. The anger in his eyes was unmistakable. The calm facade he had worked so hard to maintain was slipping away, and his frustration was becoming palpable. The audience could feel the shift in the air, sensing that this interview had taken a dangerous turn. "Let me make something clear." Trump's voice was cold now, barely controlled. "I don't care what people think or what they say. The media loves to twist things, to make mountains out of molehills. But you're not going to get me to say something that isn't true." Sarah could see that he was starting to lose his grip on the situation. His responses were becoming more defensive, his calm composure replaced by a barely contained anger. She knew she had to push further to get to the heart of the matter. "The thing is, Mr. Trump," Sarah continued, her voice steady despite the tension, "it's not just the media. People are seeing something different. There have been reports of infidelity, tension in your relationship, things that you've never addressed publicly. And now, it seems like you're getting upset because those things are finally coming to light." Trump's eyes flashed, and his fists clenched even tighter. He was visibly shaking with rage now, his earlier composure completely gone. The cameras zoomed in on his face, capturing every ounce of anger and frustration. The audience could feel the intensity of the moment. "This is ridiculous," Trump muttered under his breath, his voice low and threatening. "You don't know anything about me, about my family. These are just lies, and you're spreading them." Sarah remained calm, her eyes unwavering. She knew she had struck a nerve, but she couldn't back down now. "I'm not here to spread lies, Mr. Trump. I'm here to get to the truth, and right now, the truth seems to be slipping through your fingers. What is it that you're afraid to admit?" Trump's face turned a deeper shade of red as his frustration reached its peak. The room seemed to vibrate with tension, and the audience was on the edge of their seats, unsure of what would happen next. The questions were piling up, and Trump was running out of ways to avoid answering them. For a moment, Trump looked as if he might stand up and walk out of the interview. He looked at Sarah with a mixture of disbelief and fury. His chest heaved with each breath, and his hands were trembling at his sides. "I've had enough," Trump said, his voice dangerously low. "I won't sit here and let you continue to attack me like this." The tension in the studio was palpable, and everyone knew that this moment would define the interview. Would Trump storm out and cut the conversation short, or would he finally break and reveal something that the world wasn't expecting? As Sarah watched him, she knew this was her chance to get to the heart of the matter. The audience waited in anticipation, eager to see what would happen next. The interview had taken a sharp turn, and there was no going back now. As the words hung in the air, The room became even more charged with tension. The studio lights seemed brighter now, as if they were focusing solely on Trump and Sarah. Trump's hands were tightly gripping the arms of his chair, his knuckles white with the pressure. The anger in his eyes was unmistakable, but his body was rigid, frozen in place. He was trying to maintain control, but the intensity of the situation was slowly overwhelming him. It was clear to everyone watching that he was teetering on the edge. For a moment, there was only silence. Sarah's calm, measured gaze met Trump's fiery one, and the tension between them was almost unbearable. The audience in the studio shifted uneasily, waiting to see if Trump would indeed walk off the set. The reporters who had been sitting quietly in the background now leaned forward, eager for the next part of the drama. Every camera was focused on Trump, capturing the nervous energy in the air. Trump's breath came in short, controlled bursts as he stared back at Sarah. He wasn't used to being confronted in this way. Not so directly, not so boldly. His entire life had been carefully crafted to avoid situations where he would be forced to answer uncomfortable questions. But today, it was different. He was stuck in a corner, unable to escape the pressure. The question was no longer just about his marriage. It was about his ability to control the narrative, to protect the image he had so carefully built. Sarah knew she had to keep pushing. The world was watching, and she wasn't going to let this moment slip away. She took a deep breath, and with unwavering determination, she asked, "Mr. Trump, you say these rumors are lies, but the public has seen so much more. The details. People want to know why things are falling apart. Why is this happening?" Trump's face turned an even darker shade of red. He opened his mouth to respond, but for a moment, words failed him. His mind raced, his emotions boiling over, but he couldn't seem to find the right words. It was as if something inside him was breaking. His carefully constructed facade was cracking, piece by piece. He had been the master of control for so long, but here, under the spotlight, he was losing grip. Finally, after a long pause, Trump spoke, his voice thick with anger. "You're crossing a line, Sarah," he growled, each word dripping with venom. "You have no right to ask me these questions. This is my life, my marriage, and I don't have to explain myself to anyone." But Sarah was unfazed. She had expected this. She knew this was coming. Her eyes remained fixed on him, calm and focused. "I understand your frustration, Mr. Trump," she said, her voice steady. "But it's the public's right to know. You're a public figure. Your actions affect millions of people. If there's more to your marriage than you're letting on, people deserve the truth." Trump's hands gripped the edge of the desk now, his face contorted with fury. The studio was eerily silent, save for the sound of his heavy breathing. Everyone in the room could feel the storm brewing. Would Trump lash out? Would he finally reveal something? Anything that would shed light on what had really been going on behind the closed doors of his marriage. "I don't owe anyone an explanation," Trump shouted, suddenly rising from his chair. His voice echoed throughout the studio, booming with authority. But it was clear that his anger wasn't just a reaction to Sarah's questions. It was a reaction to the situation itself. He had never been in a position like this before. Not like this. The walls were closing in, and for the first time, he didn't know how to escape. The audience watched in shock as Trump paced back and forth in front of his chair, his fists clenched at his sides. He was visibly shaking now, his anger and frustration spilling out in every movement. The cameras captured every moment, each one of his steps amplified by the lens. It was a scene no one could have predicted. Sarah didn't flinch. She sat in her chair, poised and confident, as though she had anticipated this very reaction. She wasn't intimidated by his outbursts. She had a job to do, and she was going to finish it. "Mr. Trump," Sarah said calmly, "the truth always comes out in the end, and no matter how hard you try to cover it up, people will eventually see what's really happening. You can't hide from the truth forever." The words hung in the air, and the studio fell into another long silence. Trump stopped pacing, and for a moment, he simply stood there, his back turned to Sarah. His chest rose and fell with each deep breath, his entire body tense. Was he going to crack under the pressure? Was this the moment where everything would finally come crashing down? For a second, it looked like he might say something, but then he turned sharply, his face set in a hard expression. "Enough," he said, his voice low but filled with anger. "This interview is over." The sudden announcement stunned everyone in the room. The cameras continued rolling as Trump made his way toward the exit, his steps quick and determined. The audience sat in stunned silence, unable to fully process what had just happened. Had he truly walked out of the interview? Was this the end of the explosive conversation, or just the beginning? As the door to the studio swung open, Trump disappeared into the hallway, leaving behind a room full of questions, uncertainty, and speculation. The interview was over, but the fallout had just begun. The studio buzzed with confusion and disbelief as the door slammed behind Trump. The tension in the room was palpable, and the reporters who had been silently watching now exchanged uncertain glances. Sarah sat in her chair, her hands folded in front of her, seemingly unfazed by the chaos that had just unfolded. She knew that what had happened in those last moments would be the story. But she wasn't finished. Not yet. For a few seconds, the room was silent, the air thick with anticipation. Everyone in the studio was wondering what had just transpired. Had Trump really walked out of the interview? Was that the end of the conversation, or would he return? The cameras continued to roll, capturing every second of the aftermath. There was no turning back now. Sarah, always the professional, slowly turned to the camera and spoke. Her voice was steady, but there was a glimmer of excitement beneath the calm exterior. "Well, as you just saw, Mr. Trump didn't take kindly to the tough questions about his personal life. He chose to walk off the set rather than answer them." She paused, allowing her words to sink in before continuing. "But that's not the end of this story. The questions still remain. What is going on behind the closed doors of his marriage? What is he trying so desperately to hide?" The camera zoomed in on Sarah as she shifted in her seat, her expression turning more serious. She wasn't just reporting the facts. She was making it clear that this story was far from over. She had only scratched the surface. While Trump may have walked out of the interview, the public deserves answers, and we won't stop until those answers come to light. His refusal to speak only raises more questions. The studio audience sat quietly, waiting for more, but Sarah didn't give them the satisfaction. Instead, she turned her attention back to the camera, her expression unreadable. "We will keep following this story. Whether Trump wants to face it or not, the truth will come out." The atmosphere in the studio remained tense, and the viewers at home were undoubtedly just as captivated by what had just unfolded. Trump's abrupt exit had only added to the mystery. What was he hiding? Why had he reacted so strongly to a simple question about his marriage? And most importantly, would he return to address the issue, or was this just the beginning of a much larger scandal? Sarah stood up from her chair, signaling that the interview was officially over. The camera crews began to pack up their equipment, but the atmosphere in the room was far from over. The news would spread quickly. Trump's walkout would be the top headline, but the public's thirst for answers was far from quenched. As Sarah made her way off the set, she could hear whispers from the crew. Some were speculating about what had really happened behind the scenes. Others wondered if Trump's refusal to face the tough questions would backfire on him. One thing was certain. This was only the beginning. The story had captured the world's attention, and everyone was now waiting to see what would happen next. Would Trump be forced to confront the rumors surrounding his marriage, or would he find a way to silence the questions once and for all? And what did his explosive exit mean for his public image? The pressure was mounting, and it was clear that the story wasn't over. In fact, it had just begun. The world was watching, and the stakes were higher than ever. The mystery of Trump's marriage was far from solved, and the questions would continue to swirl. Only time would tell what the answers might be. As the studio lights dimmed and the cameras powered down, the sense of anticipation lingered. The fallout from this interview would resonate for days to come, and everyone knew that the next chapter of this story would be just as explosive. The drama was far from over, and the world was waiting for the next twist. You said. 6. ChatGPT said. As the days passed, the media frenzy surrounding Trump's walkout continued to grow. Headlines blared across newspapers, TV stations, and social media platforms. The question on everyone's mind was, what was he trying to hide? Trump's abrupt departure had only fueled speculation and intensified the focus on his marriage. The story had taken a life of its own, and there was no escaping the constant barrage of questions. Sarah's interview had become the talk of the town. The video clip of Trump storming off was shared millions of times online, each view adding to the growing anticipation of what would happen next. The pressure on Trump was mounting, and it seemed like the whole world was waiting for him to address the rumors head-on. But would he? Behind closed doors, Trump's team was scrambling. There were discussions about whether he should return to the media and attempt to salvage the situation, or if it was best to remain silent and hope the storm would blow over. His advisors were divided, with some arguing that he should confront the issue directly, while others felt it was better to avoid further questions and let the media frenzy die down. In the midst of all this chaos, a new bombshell was dropped. A well-known source, who had previously worked closely with Trump, came forward with new information about the state of his marriage. The source claimed that Trump and his wife, Melania, had been living separate lives for months, and that the cracks in their relationship were more than just rumors. The revelation sent shockwaves through the media, and the speculation reached a fever pitch. The source's statement only added fuel to the fire. As more and more people came forward with their own stories, it became clear that the truth about Trump's marriage was far more complicated than he had let on. Was his relationship with Melania truly as perfect as he had always claimed? Or had he been hiding the cracks beneath the surface? With the public's curiosity at an all-time high, Sarah's role in the unfolding drama had become even more significant. As the reporter who had first pushed Trump to confront the issue, she was now seen as the key figure in unraveling the mystery. People were waiting to see if she would continue to press for answers, or if the story would fizzle out as Trump had hoped. Sarah knew that this was not just a story about Trump's marriage. It was a story about power, control, and the lengths people would go to protect their public image. The stakes were higher than ever. Trump's reputation had been put on the line, and it was unclear whether he would be able to recover from the fallout. The public wanted answers, and they were not going to stop asking until they got them. As the days wore on, it became clear that the pressure on Trump was only increasing. The media wasn't going to let this go, and the public was demanding transparency. The story of his marriage was no longer just about gossip. It was about the truth, and people were desperate to know what was really going on. Would Trump eventually return to the spotlight to face the questions head-on? Or would he continue to evade the truth, allowing the rumors to swirl and the mystery to grow? The tension continued to build, and everyone was waiting for the next chapter of this explosive story. Meanwhile, Sarah remained focused on her goal, to uncover the truth. She knew that this story wasn't over yet. In fact, it was just beginning. The world was watching, and she was determined to follow the story wherever it would lead. As the spotlight remained on Trump, his every move was scrutinized. Each statement, each tweet, and each public appearance was analyzed in a way that he had never experienced before. The walls were closing in, and the pressure was suffocating. The question remained, would Trump finally come clean, or would he retreat into silence, allowing the mystery to remain unsolved? Only time would tell, but one thing was for certain. This story was far from over. The public's thirst for answers was unquenchable, and the drama was just getting started. The world was waiting for Trump's next move, and whatever it was bound to be just as explosive as the interview itself. As the media frenzy surrounding Trump's marriage continued to dominate headlines, the pressure on him to address the growing speculation became undeniable. For weeks, the public had been left in suspense, waiting for a definitive response from Trump or his team. But instead of facing the issue head-on, Trump remained silent, allowing the rumors to spread unchecked. His refusal to acknowledge the situation only intensified the spotlight on his personal life, and the public's curiosity showed no signs of fading. Sarah, on the other hand, was relentless. She had become the face of the story, and her determination to uncover the truth about Trump's marriage had only grown stronger. Her interview with Trump, though short and explosive, had sparked a firestorm of attention. And now, with new revelations coming to light daily, she found herself in the eye of the storm, poised to bring the truth to the surface. A few days after the interview, Sarah received an unexpected call. It was from an anonymous insider with connections to the Trump family. The person claimed to have inside information that could change everything. Sarah's heart raced as she listened intently, hanging on to every word. The insider revealed shocking details that Trump had been hiding from the public, including a series of private conversations with close associates that hinted at deep cracks in his marriage. The source, though hesitant to go public, described an intimate conversation between Trump and a confidant, during which he admitted that his marriage was not as perfect as he had portrayed. He spoke about the growing distance between him and Melania, the constant tension, and how they had both been leading separate lives for months. The insider claimed that Trump had been frustrated by the constant media attention on his personal life, and that he felt trapped by his public persona. Sarah's mind raced as she processed the new information. She knew that this could be the breakthrough she had been waiting for. The public had been desperate for answers, and now, it seemed, the truth was finally within reach. But there was a catch. The insider was not ready to go public just yet. They wanted to remain anonymous, fearing the backlash that would come from exposing Trump's personal struggles. Despite the risks, Sarah was determined to follow the lead. She had spent weeks piecing together the puzzle, and now she was closer than ever to uncovering the truth. But she needed to be careful. One wrong move could ruin the credibility of her sources and derail everything she had worked for. In the days that followed, Sarah worked tirelessly to verify the insider's claims. She reached out to other sources, cross-referencing the information with what she had already gathered. The pieces were starting to fall into place. Each new detail added another layer to the story, and the picture that was emerging was far more complicated than anyone had imagined. As Sarah dug deeper, she uncovered even more damning information. There were reports of Trump's affairs with other women, conversations about a potential divorce, and whispers of Melania's own unhappiness with their marriage. The web of secrets was becoming increasingly tangled, and the public's insatiable need for answers was growing. But as the pressure mounted, so did the risks. The more Sarah uncovered, the more she realized just how much was at stake. Trump's team was already on high alert, doing everything in their power to control the narrative and silence anyone who dared to speak out. The situation was becoming volatile, and Sarah knew she had to tread carefully. Then, just as things seemed to reach a boiling point, a new twist emerged. Trump's camp called a press conference, something that had not been planned. The announcement caught everyone off guard. Was this the moment when Trump would finally address the rumors? Would he come clean about his marriage? Or would he double down and deny everything once again? The world watched in anticipation as Trump took the stage. The cameras flashed, and the reporters were on edge, waiting for him to speak. The room was filled with a palpable sense of anticipation. Would he apologize for his outburst during the interview? Would he acknowledge the tension in his marriage? Or would he continue to dismiss the rumors and attempt to shut the media down once again? Trump stood at the podium, his face a mask of determination, but there was a noticeable shift in his demeanor. He was no longer the confident, untouchable figure he had been in the past. The weight of the accusations seemed to have taken its toll on him. He cleared his throat and began to speak, his voice steady but tinged with frustration. "Let me be clear," Trump said, his tone firm. "The media has been attacking me, spreading lies and rumors about my marriage. This is nothing more than an attempt to tear me down and distract from the real issues facing our country. My marriage is private, and I will not engage in this smear campaign any longer." He paused, his eyes scanning the room, and then continued, "I've made mistakes, like anyone else, but my personal life is just that, personal. I'm focused on the work I'm doing for the American people, and that's all that matters. Any claims of infidelity or marital issues are simply not true." As he finished his speech, the room erupted in a flurry of questions. Reporters tried to press him further, but Trump remained resolute, refusing to offer any further details. He left the press conference without addressing the rumors, leaving the world to continue speculating about his marriage. In the aftermath, Sarah and her team were left to process the latest twist in the story. Trump had refused to admit anything, but the damage had already been done. The rumors had spread far and wide, and the public's curiosity was far from satisfied. The story of Trump's marriage was still unfolding, and Sarah knew that the next chapter was just around the corner. The mystery was far from solved, and the questions about Trump's personal life would continue to haunt him. As for Sarah, she was more determined than ever to uncover the truth. The story was still far from over, and the world was watching, waiting for the next big revelation.